Kaspa might be poised for an incredibly bright future, and today we're going to be talking about why owning 2,000 Kaspa could be the equivalent of like buying a single Bitcoin back in 2013. So we're going to break down all of the numbers there as to why that is such a, why that's the golden number, at least at this point in time, and what we could see happen potentially in the future with this type of investment if it does follow a similar path to Bitcoin, and why I'm making these comparisons to Bitcoin. If you are in the Kaspa community, you probably already have a good idea. If you are new, just stick around. We'll be talking about all of that here in a second. First off, I did want to just take a quick look at the very immediate price term of what we've been seeing, and then we're going to be zooming out and thinking about why short term this maybe doesn't matter at all, and how we can kind of position ourselves to be a little bit better focused on the longer term, I guess I should say. So let's go on ahead. We'll take a look. We can see here on the Kaspa chart, if we pull this up to full screen, we can see obviously a little bit of a difficult move over the past couple of months. We have seen a little bit of a rebound here. We'll go and we'll focus back in on this here in 1 second. But if we look over the longer term, we can see kind of a little bit of chopping around ever since we saw that initial run up back in late 2023. We then have basically just been kind of chopping. We actually have seen some of the lows that we hadn't really seen prior to 2023 back here in early 2025. So we have struggled. We're lower than where we had been at basically most points in 2024. We have not actually broken, I think, lower like the higher highs, or I guess the lower highs at this point. Looks like there was maybe a wick here where we maybe broke down into these kind of lower highs, but so far our higher lows have actually been staying above these highs that we saw kind of prior to this breakout. So I do think that that is a generally good thing, and that does similarly follow Bitcoin. Usually Bitcoin does not drop below kind of the highs of the previous cycle. Now again, this may not be the previous cycle, but usually that's some decent structure that we do see forming. Now if we come back into the more short term here, I did want to talk about a specific trade we were discussing a couple weeks back, which is we can see at this point in time, we saw Kaspa pull outside of the Bollinger Bands, as well as, if we get rid of this, we did see it come into oversold. Usually this is historically quite a great time to buy, and as we can see almost immediately making a really strong run back up and even above this kind of midpoint here, even at this range getting close to kind of the top end of the Bollinger Bands. Here of course the Bollinger Bands are dynamic, so we can see that price was kind of getting closer as the Bollinger Bands squeeze a little bit. They are continuing to squeeze just because price has kind of dropped in volatility, so we're starting to see those Bollinger Bands squeeze. Of course, when Bollinger Bands squeeze, there is usually a break of volatility at some point, but we're still probably a couple weeks or at minimum a couple days away from that being recorded, at least on this time frame. So that's kind of what we're seeing right now. Overall, we have seen a little bit of a rebound up from some of these lows on Kaspa, which is good. Maybe this does mean the lows are in. This was kind of like peak fear. As many of you know, many of the Kaspa development team are based in Israel, and with the issues that were breaking out in the Middle East, a little bit nerve-wracking, particularly having that much brain power risk concentrated in kind of one country. So we're starting to see a little bit of some relief from that, I think kind of as expected and as we were seeing here. This was very much one of those, like, if you had conviction that the Middle East conflict was not going to break out into a more serious thing, then this would have been a really great time to buy, as we can see right here. So just something to think about there. Again, in the past, as you're kind of studying the Kaspa chart, just something to think about there. Again, if you are interested in buying Kaspa, trading Kaspa, any of that type of stuff, I do have the links in the description below for BTCC as well as BloFin. If you are interested in any of those, BTCC is offering a 10% bonus on first-time deposits, as well as up to $10,055 in trading and deposit bonuses as well. If you are interested, also no VPN or KYC necessary, so feel free to just take a look in the description below if you are interested. Now, moving along, we can see here, this is a very long post. I'm not going to read all of it. I'm just going to focus on the highlights from Dr. Martin Heisbeck, something like that. You can see he is the head of research at Uphold. Also 108,000 followers, so pretty notable, pretty well recognized and well respected within the space. We can see he does a very quick somewhat extensive overview of Kaspa, what it is, how it works, why it's important, all that good stuff. We can see here, understanding Kaspa, a revolutionary blockchain, decentralization and mining efficiency, talks about that. We can also see transaction speed and finality, again, another important piece here, as well as innovative applications and scalability, and then proof of work, integrity, and fair launch. All of essentially kind of the highlights of Kaspa, what makes it cool and what makes it special. We can see here, this is a quote from Dr. Martin Heisbach, or Heisbeck, however you say that. Bitcoin was the Kaspa testnet. I know this is absolute music to many Kaspa holders' ears, and this is something that I think is very important to understand, and we're going to be looking at Kaspa and at the more of the economic side and the price side to see what this could look like if that is actually true, and why we could see Kaspa being one of the major asymmetric plays and asymmetric bets you could make if you even think this is reasonably true. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. You can also see here, there's a little bit of some more context here about the economic model and future outlook if you are interested. So pretty interesting and pretty noteworthy person talking about Kaspa here and kind of trying to like spread the awareness of what we're actually seeing here. So I think this is very, very important. This is the type of stuff that you want to see as people start to figure it out and get a hang of it, right? I mean, this is kind of what happened to Bitcoin. There are a lot of people, laughing and being like, oh, Bitcoin is nothing special. Oh, Bitcoin's just magical internet money. And then now we're sitting at $100,000 Bitcoin, right? And so I think if Kaspa can truly deliver on many of the innovations of Bitcoin, of course, Bitcoin is the first mover, so it's always going to have that advantage. But maybe there's a little bit of some piece that can be peeled off because of the better technology and the better scalability and similar decentralization and mining as Kaspa. So we'll have to see how this all goes. One thing I want to take a quick look at here, though, is the Kaspa price chart viewing Gecko, because we can see here fully diluted valuation is about 1.93 billion. Current is about 1.936. You can see max supply is about 28.7 billion. This is also mentioned in Dr. Heisbach's thing here, his overview with a total supply of 28.7 billion Kaspa. So we can see we're actually very, very close to being fully diluted here. The dilution scale or the dilution mechanism is actually far more aggressive than what we're seeing out of Bitcoin. I mean, this is more diluted than Bitcoin, and obviously Bitcoin doesn't stop emitting until I think 2140. So definitely very different there, and I'm interested to see if that's going to change the underlying economics and dynamics of Kaspa. It could potentially, but what we're seeing here is just kind of how it's the DAG, it's got mining, it's decentralized, it did the fair launch. It's done basically all of this type of stuff to make it as replicatable to Bitcoin as it can. I think the only thing that's changed here is time. Bitcoin has of course had 16 years at this point to mature into what it is, and it does feel like Kaspa is trying to accelerate that time frame a little bit. As you can see, it only did start launching here on 2022, so it's about 3 years out, and Bitcoin's about 16. So there is a little bit of a difference there. However, what we can see kind of more importantly is I want to start to kind of do some number conversions here. So I had made the mention that 2,000 Kaspa could be the equivalent of buying one Bitcoin. We will be talking about why right now. We can see here the market cap is about $2 billion with a price of about 7 cents per Kaspa. If we come back and we look at Bitcoin historical prices, we can see and then in 2013, the starting price was $135 and ended at about $754. But if you look here at the very top, you can see the 2013 price. 2013 price was essentially very, very low all the way up until about July. And then the second half of the year, we saw an extreme move in 2013 all the way back. And I guess it stops recording about September, which is kind of bizarre, but you can see it ended the year at about $754. Now, if we go up a little bit, now, of course, this is not a perfect comparison, but this is kind of the best comparison I could get at a quick level, just because we're going so far back when the data on Bitcoin was not as good. But we can see that the average market cap for Bitcoin was about $3 billion. Now, the average price was about $255 is kind of what they're saying. The max price being $1,100 and the minimum being $65. So I'm saying if we take the open price of about $135, and essentially the price price all the way up until about that July to August timeframe, or I guess the July timeframe, we're going to be getting essentially a sub $200 Bitcoin, anywhere between 130 to, I think, like we see lows like $65, $70. So we're essentially looking at that range. Well, with Kaspa, if you were to hold 2,000 Kaspa, that's $140 of like fiat investment, right? So that is equivalent to buying roughly one Bitcoin at that point in time. Now, of course, we can see that Bitcoin is $100,000 today at a nearly $2 trillion market cap. And of course, Kaspa, I'm not going to make any sort of direct price predictions because I don't know for sure, but hopefully you can see that buying $140 of Kaspa today is effectively the equivalent of buying one Bitcoin. Now, obviously there are more Kaspa than there are Bitcoin, but you're buying the same amount essentially as it relates to the market cap, which is why you're buying 2,000 Kaspa and not one. So hopefully that makes sense as to what I'm saying here. In my opinion, you have people like Dr. Martin Heisbach, who is the head of research for Uphold, which is a very, very large platform where a lot of people do hold crypto. You have people like him taking note of Kaspa and understanding, potentially where the value could be a little bit further on into the future. And so when you have people like this start to notice, you already obviously have had some pretty nice and pretty inspiring price movement happening from the Kaspa coin itself already. This to me seems like it could potentially be a wildly asymmetric bet, similar to Bitcoin in the sense that even if you would have just put $100 into Bitcoin in 2013, here 12 years later, you're looking at 1,000x that at $100,000. So, that is potential. I'm not saying that Kaspa will do the same thing. I'm not saying it can do the same thing. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is just my opinions and me talking and kind of essentially trying to draw a thread through what we've seen other really, really smart people in the industry say. And so, potentially we see Kaspa follow a similar trajectory. Maybe we see something in Bitcoin, it's not scalable. Obviously it's considered more right now as a store of value and the hardest form of money, which I think is awesome. But maybe there's some unforeseen thing that comes up in the future, and maybe there's like a technological upgrade that's needed. Maybe Kaspa fills that hole. Maybe Bitcoin in the main layer just gets updated. Of course, Bitcoin does have kind of that first mover advantage, but maybe there's always a place for, a secondary, maybe higher tech type of version that follows a lot of the similar principles and general understandings of Bitcoin, but maybe just does it in a little bit different way, and that could be Kaspa. So, of course, there's an infinite number of outcomes and an infinite number of futures. So who knows exactly for sure what will happen. But these are a lot of different things that, we could potentially see. And the way I'm viewing it is, maybe you don't need to mortgage the farm and go buy a bajillion Kaspa, but maybe 2,000 Kaspa could be a way to hold that and just have a really, really strong potential asymmetric bet if it does take a similar path to Bitcoin, just because that's what, more and more people are kind of starting to catch on to over time. So anyway, hopefully the information in this video was useful to you. If it was, a like and a subscribe, of course, really, really does help me out. Also, if you have any thoughts, comments, questions, whatever, drop those in the comment section below. I do read and respond to all of those. So anyway, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.